Hello, and welcome to this episode of Learning How to Learn from Expanding Frontiers Research. My name is Jack Brewer, and I'll be your host for this episode. Learning How to Learn is a collection of video interviews with qualified individuals on how to sort reliable information from the often false and misleading content that is so widely distributed on the internet, in videos, at media outlets, and in print. My guest today is Aaron Gulyas, a historian and teacher at Mott Community College in Michigan. Aaron is also an accomplished writer and a widely respected podcaster. He has a number of interesting comments today and insightful things to share, so let's dive right in. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this episode of Learning How to Learn. My guest is Aaron Gulyas, a teacher, historian, and writer. He received his BA in history from Hanover College and an MA in United States history from Indiana University, Indianapolis. He teaches at Mott Community College in Michigan, where his courses cover U.S. and world history. Aaron is the author of a number of books on television, science fiction, and fringe political cultures. He hosts The Saucer Life, a popular podcast widely respected for its accuracy on the history and lore of flying saucer culture. Thank you for joining me, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sure. Now, let's say I'm scrolling social media, I'm checking out this video, that video, I click on an article and I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. How do I begin to sort fact from fiction in that article?
Well, I think the first thing to do is stop scrolling social media. That's but seriously though, I think one of the first things to do before even thinking about sources and factualness or anything is to think about how that video, that story, that meme, or whatever it is made you feel. Because that's one of the things that social media algorithms really feed on is generating some kind of emotional response, because an emotional response is going to prompt engagement, and the more engagement there is, the more money is made. So a lot of this content, even when it's shared, with the best of intentions by our friends and neighbors and colleagues, it's still part of this ecosystem of trying to get a reaction. So if somebody's posting funny memes and you're like, haha, that's great because that's exactly how I feel. It's like, well, think about why you feel that way before you hit the like button. Is it because it's something real? It's something factual, or something that we can take action about in a direct way? Or is it just kind of political pornography that just hits that sort of center of the brain that makes us feel like we're right? I think that's one of the worst things about social media is it's divided everything into who is right and who is wrong without acknowledging that so many of these things are so complex. There isn't a simple right or wrong answer to Israel and Palestine or Russia and Ukraine. There's just things we just feel that hit us emotionally. So I think the first thing to think about is, why am I reacting to this in this way? And then when I get into the video or the text, and actually, I think one of the best things people can do is to try not to watch videos as much as they do read things. I think reading things can detach us from some of the emotionalism and reaction that we have to people's tone of voice, to their facial expressions and gestures and things like that. I've always found it, for example, much more edifying to not watch an inauguration address or a State of the Union address from a president, but to read the transcript afterward, because you get caught up in people applauding, or you get caught up in something that makes you so angry that you're just, you know, doing an Elvis and shooting out the TV or something, or wishing that you could. So apart from that emotional stuff, I think the biggest thing is, and this is something that I think current news media, especially on the internet, doesn't do well, is this thing that we're looking at, is this designed to be a factual news account, or is it an opinion piece or an editorial? Those categories tend to get really blurred these days. And worst of all are the advertorials, where you think it's an editorial about something, but really it's just an advertisement to try to get you to buy something. So sort of sorting out those categories. Is this meant to be somebody's opinion? Is this meant to and meant to persuade me, or is this just a report of an incident? And then look for who it quotes, and what officials, what people involved in the actual situation on the ground have to say about it. And one thing that I think is really important to do sometimes is, if it's something pretty groundbreaking and you're reading this and you're thinking, oh wow, this is a real scary thing, and they've quoted this official about it. Google that official's name, because a lot of times journalism has become just reprinting quotes from a press release or a statement, rather than actually involving interviews and things like that. If that's the case, what's the full context of the quotations you've read in this article, or the sound bites that you've seen in a video? Because there might be more to it than is there in what you see. Those are some starting points that I would have, just to make sure you know what you're reading about, and whether the people cited in the article actually said things in the way that the writer or the video creator said they did. And if something seems absolutely ridiculous, it probably is. I mean, these days, who knows? I mean, we've seen stories in the last, 48 hours that, 10 years ago, I would have said, well, that's not real. That's just scaremongering or whatever. But some of this stuff is legit that we see. One final thing about that is, this is sort of a genre of all the clickbait headlines we see. But any headline that is phrased as a question, you almost know this is not going to be worth reading. And most of the time, you can just answer no to the question, and you'll probably be right. But these question headlines, and I get sucked into it too. That Google home screen that comes up when I open Chrome, it knows things I like, and it's like, is this camera the camera that will end digital photography as we know it? And it's like, no, it's not. It's like, I don't even need to read that. But those are sorts of things that I think are important to check out as we try to navigate our way through the current newsscape.
Oh, absolutely. Good stuff there. Thank you. As important as knowing why the content creator, be it a recognized media outlet or just Joe with his YouTube channel, as important to ask what's in it for them. Why create the content? Your point is great, that it's important for me to ask myself, why do I feel like I need to show this to more people? or why do I feel like I need to object to this?
Yeah.
And that's coming up again and again during in this series of videos is cognitive bias, the
Mhm.
emotional attachment of maybe I care a little less about checking sources if it supports my point of view.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I mean, I know that's right. Why would I fact check this article that is so clearly, on the right side of history or something like that? And that's because it might be sloppy. And if you're trying to persuade people on social media by sharing something and saying, "Hey, everybody, you need to read this story and see what's really going on out there," it's really embarrassing to have people in the comments be like, yeah, I don't know. This seems like a poorly sourced article. This is clearly rage bait, something like that. But if it's designed to hit those emotional centers in the brain, it's very sophisticated. People have built entire billion-dollar companies based on getting us to react to our gut level feelings about some of this stuff. And that's fine when you're liking and sharing videos of bulldogs or something. But when it's domestic policy, international policy, dangerous things that, you know, could, there are policies that could get people hurt, right? And if we share bad information about those things, it doesn't do people in vulnerable populations any good. And yeah, so it's just there's there's an entire industry out there designed to manipulate our emotions through this stuff, and it's worrying.
Yes. Now, I'm a fan of the saucer life. I've read a couple of your books, and one of the things I appreciate is that you take people through the evolution of a narrative
Hmm.
or a conspiracy theory. Would
Yeah.
you tell us some about the importance of finding those sources and walking readers, students, whatever the case may be, through that evolution,
Yeah,
please?
I think that's important because every sort of narrative that's out there, it had a starting point. And sometimes you can't find it, or you find a couple of things that kind of look like it might be a starting point. But then as you follow these things, whether it's the sovereign citizen stuff or the Men in Black or Mothman or whatever, you see that it changes. And sometimes it changes because there are new witnesses in paranormal stuff, or there are new theories or new evidence or new information. Other times it changes because people are sloppy and tell a story badly. And for whatever reason, the more badly, less well detailed version usually ends up being the one that gets shared a lot, which is kind of frustrating. But I think seeing how those narratives change tells us a lot about the world in which these stories developed. There's always little clues you can get as to the historical and cultural and social contexts of these things. I think it's important to see how some individuals can change a narrative or emphasize different parts of a narrative in order to suit an agenda that they have. I think with the UFO field, we see this a lot. I think the disclosure crowd is very, very invested in making sure everything points to a government cover up and a big revelation coming down the line. So any UFO story from the past is sort of fodder for that viewpoint. And for those who like a John Keel, Jacques Vallée, more esoteric explanation for those sorts of things, they can take any narrative and angle it in a different way and say, well, no, this is really what's happening here. And I think with some topics like that, we won't ever know what really happened. I don't know why, and what happened to Antonio Villas-Boas on that Brazilian saucer or whatever. And nobody's ever going to know that for sure. But the way the story's told and retold can tell us a lot about the people doing doing the telling, and of course we have to watch our own biases when we look at that sort of stuff as well, because I know if somebody comes to me saying, "Hey, what about this story about this guy testifying before Congress?" I'm just like, my brain shuts down. I'm not interested. But if somebody's like, "Hey, I found some great letters from Gray Barker to Jim Mosley about this, that, or the other," I'm like, haha, sign me up. This is the real truth right here, or at least this is something I'm more interested in. So I think tracking those narratives throughout time, this is not a great parallel, and I'm not saying these things are of equal importance on a global scale, but seeing the development of a strand of UFO belief over time is a lot like looking at the development of a religion, from its inception to its growth to internal debates and councils and schisms and things like that. And I'm not saying that contactees versus abductees is on the same level as like the Council of Chalcedon or something in the 5th century, but it's that same sort of method of going through and seeing where the debates are and understanding what developed. I tell my students, history, understanding the past is not some sort of magic wand for predicting the future. I think that, that's a misconception, and you've got things like those who fail to learn history are doomed to repeat it. Well, it, it doesn't work like that. What history does is it tells us why the world today looks like it does, and it gives us a deeper understanding of how we got to this point. So understanding how American conservatism goes from, William F. Buckley to Reagan to Trump, seeing that strand develop gives us more insight into where we are today, and that gives us a more critical eye to look at some of these news stories where you have headlines like "Trump is completely different than anything that's come before." It's like, well, I don't know. Let's look back. Let's look at Andrew Jackson talking about defying Supreme Court orders and things like that. There's not a lot new under the sun, right? So I think understanding that sort of longitudinal path that these stories take can give us a deeper understanding for the present.
Yes. What I'm thinking about as I listen is, without the knowledge of the evolution of the narrative, it does seem new and exciting.
Yeah,
And people that might have nefarious intent or charlatans or hoaxers are looking for audiences that aren't aware of that their methods can be demonstrated to have been repeated over
absolutely.
time.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And
and yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the with regard to UFO stuff, I think Adam Gorightly's book "Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks" is a great example of how you can examine these narratives going all the way back into the 1970s to things that are still kind of current today. And he was fortunate enough to be able to talk to some of the people involved in the ways that that elements within the government and outside the government can work to manipulate individuals and spawn all sorts of stories that just won't go away. It's fascinating.
Yes, it is. And this may seem like a rather inconsequential question. And as you said earlier, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it would have seemed ridiculous to even
Mhm.
ask. But I'm going to ask,
Okay.
given the state of the nation and the implications. What is the importance of documenting history? Well, the importance of what historians do and keeping accurate records.
I think keeping accurate records allows future generations to look back and understand the steps in whatever process got us from point A to point B with regard to particular policies or laws or court decisions or things like that. I think that is incredibly important, especially with public records. These are not to sound like some sort of hippie, but these are our records. We are the public, right? So this is stuff that we need to be able to examine, and there's a pushback against that, and I don't know from some people, and I don't know if that is I I don't know if that is just an intentional attempt to obfuscate and obscure what people in power might be doing, or if there is also, I think that's absolutely part of it, but I wonder if it's also just a profound ignorance of what records are for and what record keeping is for and what having evidence of generations past is very important. I have my students uh, go in and there's one of the Navy archive sites. They've got a really nice thing where you can click on different documents with different opinions in the military leadership about dropping the atomic bomb on Japan. And so I have them pick one and then tell us about it and sort of where it fits in the we absolutely should bomb them or this is the last thing we should do, and sort of it collectively it gives us an idea of what that decision making process was like, because otherwise you just read and then we dropped two bombs on Japan, and we don't understand that this was a complex decision making process and that it wasn't a unanimous thing. It wasn't like everybody was on board. There were people within the military who were like, I don't know, this seems like a a bad sort of precedent to set and things like that. And without those records, if those records would have been purged or something because, oh well, we don't want I'm Admiral so and so and I don't want people to know that I didn't support dropping the bomb, or I don't want people to know I opposed dropping the bomb or something, or supported dropping the bomb or something like that. If we don't have that, then all we have without the sources, all we have are historians writing sort of master narratives and telling us this is what happened. But especially with the internet and archives and things being digitized and online, FOIA requests, things like that, we can go in and find these things for ourselves. And we might not have the training or skill of all have the training or skill of professional historians, but that's the great thing about history. If you can read, you can learn about history. You don't need a lab. You don't need, fancy electron microscopes. You just need an internet connection or a library and the ability to read, and you can put things together. And if somebody goes into that process with with a sort of sense of fairness and a desire to understand the facts, then they can get somewhere. But we also have to acknowledge that we all have the particular lenses through which we view the world, and that shapes how we read information and evidence, and how we interpret that, and how we share it with others. So, sort of back to your first question, I think one of the essential things about you know absorbing information is to have a fairly broad diet, and don't just say, well, Fox News is right, so I'm just going to watch Fox News. And on the other hand, don't say, well, Fox News is always terrible. I don't care what they say. They are never right about anything. It's all just a scam. Well, if one cable news network is a scam, they kind of all are, right? So there are different viewpoints. There's what we've seen recently with Jeff Bezos and the editorial page of the Washington Post saying basically this is going to be politically and economically this newspaper's editorial viewpoint. And I might not agree with that viewpoint, but I also have to acknowledge that this idea of a fair and balanced, even-handed approach to journalism and editorial writing is a relatively new phenomenon. In the 19th century, there's reasons why newspapers are called like the Jonesville Democrat or the Smithville Republican or something like that. These newspapers were organs of the political party. And like many things, we seem to be drifting back to the 19th century in that realm. Between tariffs and firm political viewpoints on editorial pages being proclaimed, it really does feel like the 1890s to me. And that's not great unless you're a straight white middle-aged guy. And it's hard to watch these things happening and realizing, these ideas, these viewpoints, these policies, these are not new. These are not novel. And this is going to end up hurting people. And so we think the best we can do is sort of, try to present information and share information that is accurate and that can be a bulwark against nonsense, really, or especially mendacious nonsense.
Yes, yes. Let me ask you, Aaron, is there anything you'd like to add that perhaps I haven't specifically asked about, or that you'd recommend I ask knowledgeable people going forward?
I would say that the first question about how do you determine the truth or falsity or reliability of a news story, I think that is really good, especially as you interview more journalists and things like that. It's like, what do they do in their profession to ensure that this is something that is a reliable thing for people to read? Yeah, I think that's the heart of it. And we learn how to learn by understanding the world around us the best we can, by looking at a variety of sources, um, by and not just saying, well, every source is equally true. You don't want to both sides stuff. But to be fair, there are some issues that are complex, and there are multiple sides to interrogate, and then weigh those against your own beliefs and ethics, and then act on those conclusions as a citizen of a free nation. That's been the deal forever. And the more people who are empowered to act on those things, to act in the political arena, I think the better off we are.
Yes, thank you. And I want to thank you again for being a guest and generously giving some of your time. And please tell us, where can folks find your work and your podcast?
If you go to saucerlife, all one word.com, everything is there. That's the best place to go.
All right. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening and watching Learning to Learn. This is a series of concise video interviews from Expanding Frontiers Research. Find more useful links and resources in the video description, and visit us at expandingfrontiersresearch.org. And please support our work on the EFR Patreon page. Thank you.